Record here. And so Zhang, I kind of told you a little bit about what these group calls kind of are. So the first group call of every month, we kind of go over a different topic, whether that topic is leadership development, servant leadership, integrity, resilience, whatever it may be. It's a different topic. And so we're on the second week now. And the second Monday of every month, we're going to have a guest speaker on. And so the guest speaker this week is Sydney Ross, and she's going to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the topic that we went over last week. And then the third week of the month will be kind of an athlete Q&A where right now you're the only athlete on here. So you would get an opportunity to ask really
Yeah.
any question or questions that you want to ask or that you may be walking through in your season of whether that's basketball or baseball or whatever it may be. And then the fourth one are like kind
Mhm.
of athlete like breakout groups where you'll kind of get an opportunity to kind of bounce things off your peers. And if Jackson was on here, you guys would have an opportunity to like talk and go back and forth and really interact with all of our coaches. And so tonight, like I said, I'm Coach Joe, and then Coach Nolan here in the corner, and then Sid up here. But Sid's gonna take it away here and kind of introduce and share a little bit about her.
Yeah, well, I'm Sydney. So I just got done playing softball at UNO. I played for 5 years. So I'm from Kansas City, actually, where Nolan's playing hockey right now. Go KC. But yeah, rep. So I got there 5 years ago and I'm a catcher. And so that's my position these last 5 years. Just got done. I'm currently working in Omaha. I'm at the Salvation Army's community center, just being like an event coordinator, helping with all the stuff around there. So it's been fun finishing my master's while also having a little part-time job. But today, like Joe said, we're going to talk about servant leadership. So there's two kind of definitions I wanted to bring up. One is more of like a very broad definition that you can kind of use in like sports, the workplace, anything like that, with people. And then the other one's more of like a sports specific one. So the broad one is a servant leader is a leader who prioritizes the needs, growth, and well-being of others over their own personal gain or authority. This leadership style is characterized by a deep commitment to serving the people they lead, empowering them to succeed and grow. And then the more sports specific one is an athlete as a servant leader works to ensure that the environment they create and the energy they bring to their sport allow for their teammates and coaches to thrive. And so throughout both of these definitions, I feel like the main takeaway is that your focus is on others, not yourself. And so emphasizing that push to motivate others and stuff like that instead of elevating yourself is kind of where the servant leadership takes place. And so I think one important thing to kind of know about servant leadership is that you kind of have to be okay with not receiving all the glory. You have to be okay with not being the one always being praised, not being the one in the spotlight all the time, because what you're doing is putting the spotlight on others or, promoting others more than yourself. So, of course, like people will end up seeing your value and like respecting and, later on, but it's not nearly as much as you'd think. So I think that's one thing that is really cool about being a servant leader, but it can also be difficult. So it's something you kind of just like have to hold on to. Um, so I kind of have like a couple points that I wanted to bring up. So one is just having to do with my experiences. So I actually have a not so great experience as a not so great leader. And I think that's important that you recognize that you can have those experiences and still, grow from them. So one of the ones that I have is my junior year. Um, I had been walking with Jesus for a year, so I was pretty new into, just being humble and, knowing how to like be that person in front of my team, in front of, just my character. And so one day you play baseball, so I'm sure you know how difficult like hitting off the machine can be. Yeah, so we had a January practice where it was like preseason. All we were doing for 3 hours was hitting off machines, and they wanted us to work. So I was not touching them. I was getting angry. I was getting frustrated. Um, and how I reacted when I got frustrated like this was like I shut down. I isolated myself. I didn't really want to talk to people because I was like, okay, if I talk to people, I'm gonna be rude or I'm gonna come off like how I don't want to come off. So I kind of just like pushed people away and let like those negative feelings kind of just like weigh me down. And I ended up being like convicted or showed that, that wasn't the way I was supposed to live, and not the way I was supposed to act as a leader, as a teammate, and as a friend. And so I had to kind of like that was the that was like the time when I found out my identity itself wasn't in sports. It was more in just like who I was as like my character. And that softball wasn't my life or my identity. It was just like how I could, develop relationships and connect with people. Um, and just live that life to the fullest extent. So it really that was something that had to, you know, hit me like a rock because I wasn't acting in the way I should have. One of the first times I implemented service or servant leadership into like my own lifestyle was when I first began to like want to start a Bible study for the softball team. This took, I was really nervous about it. It took a lot of courage and a lot of strength that I was given, but it ended up helping me grow so much because it just really represented what servant leadership was. Because when each week when I was looking over, study material or I was going through something or spending more time with the Lord, like I was doing it for others, but like it was helping me grow myself. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about servant leadership is because like even when you prioritize the needs and the growth um and the benefit of others, like you will automatically, rise up along with that because it's not going to leave you behind. Like you will grow and you will elevate with them. So I think that's super cool, and something that, can be overlooked within servant leadership. And then another like cool example that I remember watching like a docu-series off Netflix called Redeem Team. I think it was like a basketball one, the USA like Olympic team. And it was talking about how Kobe Bryant, like there was one day um where the guys were at like the rest of the team was at like a casino and they came back at 4 a.m. And then when they were coming in to like go to bed or whatever, Kobe was going out to lift and work out and he was up and at it and like motivated and they were like, what is this guy doing? And so that like always has stuck with me because the day after and the weeks after, like everyone ended up, joining him at 4:30 a.m. for the workouts. Like that that motivation that he had like automatically, shifted and like moved others to help follow him. So I think that that's super cool and like he's a good person to look up to within servant leadership for sure. And the second kind of point I wanted to talk about was that leadership can take time and you will have to endure some trials and some struggling with it because I mean, as much as we like to think like leaders are in the spotlight, like you get the recognition, you get the award, you get all the glamour and the glory, like there's a lot of things you have to go through behind closed doors and that people don't see that is really tough. And like dealing with people can be really tough, especially when you don't see eye to eye. Um, and so I'm actually going through First Samuel right now, and so it's talking about how like the preparation stages of becoming a leader is so important. So he's talking about how like King David was privately anointed king at the age of 15, but he didn't get publicly anointed king until the age of 30. So that's 15 years of, behind closed doors, like being prepared, being growing in wisdom, growing in experience, and all these things. Um, and obviously, hopefully we don't have to deal with 15 years like in the sports world, but like there's going to be months, there's going to be seasons where like you're not going to be the leader at the time and it's going to be hard and there's going to be someone else playing in your position. I remember coming in my freshman year with someone playing in my position and I was like, I should have the spot. Like people are telling me I should have the spot, like blah blah. And it took me weeks to understand, like, no, like that's not the point. I'm here for a reason. Like, how can I grow? Um, and because there are uncontrollables that we can't control. So it's like I can't, take that upon myself and, stress myself out with those things. So might as well just like go with it and grow myself and, experiences through that. And so I think it's super important to understand how like trust in the process is something that we need to prioritize in our life and that we can learn from David's story and take advantage in the waiting season and the preparation seasons and really focus on our own like growth and stuff like that. And I think this can also lead into like reflecting on your own personality. Everyone is created so differently and beautifully, and everyone has like different characteristics that help them become a better leader. And I think one of the beautiful things about servant leadership is that anyone can be a servant leader. I don't think you have to be a loud leader. I don't think it's more of like a quiet leader. I think anyone can take on that servant leadership responsibility. It's just, okay, how are you going to use that boldness? Is it going to be used for good, or are you going to like criticize and condemn and stuff? So it's like, how can we reflect on our personality to be better for the people around us? And the last thing I kind of want to talk about was like finding what motivates you. Um, I think so there's two types of motivations. There's intrinsic and then there's extrinsic. And so intrinsic is motivation that you have to perform an activity for your own sake, and your own personal rewards, and it arises from within. External motivation is the motivation to perform an activity to earn a reward or even to avoid a punishment. And so I think we live in a society, especially within the sports world, where extrinsic motivation is like what we think of. We think of, the first place trophy. We think of the MVP that we get at the end of the weekend or the end of the game. We think about not wanting to disappoint our parents, and not wanting to disappoint our teammates, as we're playing any of the sports that we play. So while these things like those can be effective to an extent, that push, but they're not dependable, and like they can help you lose the love of the game, I think. So it's like really important to find like your why. Why are you playing this game? Why are you going through all these practices, those 3, 4 practices a week? Why are you getting up at 6 a.m. for a game far away on the weekends? Like why are you doing these things? And so for me, my intrinsic motivation had changed a little bit over the years in college, but like finally this last year, my intrinsic motivation was my parents. And this is because I'll tell a little bit of my story, but my mom passed in 2022 from cancer, and then my dad passed last year from a heart attack. So really like coming into my last year of softball, I was like, okay, why am I here? Because I clearly am here for a reason. I'm clearly playing my last year of softball for a reason, even if it's not like, even if the people who matter most in my life aren't able to watch it, like, what can I do for them? And that was play the game. And that was give back to what they did my entire life of, bringing me to those 6 a.m. tournaments, driving 2 hours, bringing me across the country for those tournaments, having multiple jobs to be able to pay for those expenses and stuff like that. And, giving up their entire lives for that. So I think that last year it really helped me figure, okay, like I want to play for them. It made every bad game, terrible strikeout, it like mean nothing, because like what is the point? It was so much deeper and it was so much more fulfilling knowing that like I was doing it for a reason. So I would just encourage you to like find your why. Like what makes you want to do this? Is it the people that you're around? Is it the love for the game? Is it anything like that? So that's what I would encourage, because it'll last a lot longer than those extrinsic motivations. And so I kind of led into this, but like the things that I, wanted to talk about and I want you guys to understand or want you guys to get is, find what motivates you. Um, Spend time reflecting on your personality and who you are and how you can, grow those traits in order to be the best teammate, be the best leader that you can be. Um, because everyone has amazing personality traits that are so different from each other. And that makes all leaders like so influential at different times. And then lastly, learn from the leaders around you. If they're great leaders, learn from them. If they're bad leaders, learn from them. You can learn from people's mistakes. I know I've learned from my own mistakes and others' mistakes, and I've learned from the amazing people who have led from the bench, there's so many ways that you can lead. So just watch and take advantage of that preparation season where you're maybe, not the leader yet, but you will step into that, position at some point. And then I just wanted to close with like a verse that I really liked, that I found or I just like came upon, Philippians 2:3-4. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. So I think that really spoke to me because it just represents like what we're called to do. And especially as servant leaders, like anyone can do this. Anyone can put others before themselves and, set their own wants aside because in the end, like we talked about, like it'll help you grow, it'll help you elevate, and it's not just like, a one-sided thing. That's it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Sid. That was really good. Just some of the ideas of right, like sometimes we have to sacrifice our own, like being in the spotlight, our own get receiving the accolades to put our teammates above us, to put those around us first. And in return, you will eventually, like Sydney said, probably step into that leadership role and when the time is right. And we're all leaders and you can lead, like you said, from the bench, from the starting lineup, from wherever it is, by your words, by your actions. The Kobe story, right? I think that's awesome. That's just leading by showing up. Like I think he didn't even have to. I watched that documentary and I think there was times where he didn't even have to say a word. Like people just knew by the way he carried himself and his demeanor. And so I don't know. What do you think, Zane, about just the idea of either like what motivates you or the idea of servant leadership? Do you find it difficult or something you need that you are good at, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I think I can see that I am a natural leader on the basketball and even like in the classroom or in real world situations. And I feel like as kind of the example that some people take from, I can sometimes do better because that like leads into them and what they learned from. And yeah, so kind of even learning from my dad, a great leader, and just like kind of getting the good stuff and as you said, learning from the good and bad leaders. Like I can see my peers and like what they're doing wrong and learn from it and try to help them learn from it also.
Yeah.
I would add too, if I could, like to Sid's point, um, like you can learn the good and bad from all leaders, but also every bad leader has good qualities. And so like I played for a junior team in Michigan at one point for hockey, Zane. And to be honest, like the captain I had was like brutal. Like I thought the way he treated people was like wrong. I thought like a lot of the ways he went out of about his business wasn't right. But I will say he was one of the most consistent players I've ever played with. And he showed up and he was the same like player day in and day out. So I think like you can see the good and bad in leaders, but also even within some of those leaders who are like, okay, like I'm not going to follow what they do. I still believe truly we can learn a little bit of something from everyone. Like everyone can be our teacher too. Um, so I think that's pretty big. So I really like that point too.
Yeah, that's good. Who do you feel like is your like a leader that you've really like looked up to? Like have you ever had a really like strong coach, or I know you mentioned your dad, Zane, that you feel like you've been able to take some of those like leadership qualities from and try to implement?
Yeah, so him, and then also I've had really good coaches over the years. Like I had my coach on my old basketball team. He was a really good leader and just kind of showed me like what to do, and personally taught me about not just basketball but life situations.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think all of it, right? What Sid said at the beginning too about like there's servant leadership qualities that you can take and you can use in life. And then like you just mentioned too, like in your sport. And so like we can be a servant leader, yes, on the basketball court, like as you're getting ready to step into another season where you're going to be surrounded by coaches and teammates and opponents from both teams everywhere, right? But it's the way you carry yourself. I was just talking to a group of athletes yesterday that played in the Elkhorn South West Side game last week, and it was a blowout. It was pretty bad. It was like
Yeah,
38-3 at halftime or something. But one guy in the middle of the second half, when he could have let the temper get out of hand, he could have maybe lashed out and maybe got a flag or a 15-yard penalty after a play after each and every play, every tackle he made, even though they were down by almost 40 points, he put his hand down and helped the other guy up every single play. And in return, he started to see his teammates do the same thing. And so I think that just goes to show like you don't need to be the most vocal guy in the world ever. You may be that may be one of your strengths, but it goes to show how far actions can go in the saying that actions speak louder than words and truly treating people with respect and showing up for people, it goes a long way. And so I just thought that was a cool story, kind of a putting servant leadership into action in the midst of a game.
mm.
Zane, what grade are you in?
I'm in eighth grade.
Okay. I think this is a good question. So, Sydney, this is something you alluded to that I thought was really good. Um, and so you said you talked about some of those things behind the scenes, and one of the examples you used was like when you came in, you thought you could have been playing over somebody else, like, but it just wasn't the right timing. Can you speak to that a little bit and what that looked like behind the scenes for you? And it can be at UNL, it can be a different experience, but just like what did that look like for you to just be a consistent servant leader when things weren't going your way?
Yeah. So it was my freshman year when this happened, and it was just like a few weeks that it like really put like it felt like the weight of the world was on me because I was doing it to myself, with all these expectations, and all that stuff. But I think to get out of that, I just had to get to the point where I was like I'm here, like playing the game I love with the people I love. Like I'm I can only do as much as I'm like given, like with the opportunities, like I'm gonna do what I can do, but like again, you can't, control the uncontrollable. So if I'm not getting chances, then I'll, be the best, most loud, like cheer, most enthusiastic person on the bench, and be out there like actively like putting in effort, and not just like kind of like throwing the ball around, but like, just being present in the game even though I wasn't playing because I knew once I did get those opportunities, like I wasn't going to do well if I were like tense and angry and frustrated. I would only, do well if I was like loose and having fun and enjoying like the game that I came there to play. So I would say that was one way that it helped me to get out of that mindset.
Yeah, it's really good. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I like the part too, like the verses you read in Philippians 2, 3 and 4 about like putting others first, and then just to what add on to what you just said about how you showed up and you were encouraging others, you were loud, you were like the biggest cheerleader, you had a good attitude. And after that, the next verse actually in Philippians 2, after 3 and 4, it says we must have the same attitude as Christ. And so it right correlates after it talks about like, hey, we need to put others first. We need to put others first. We need to serve others well. And then it says, and have the same attitude of Christ Jesus. And so Zane, I mean, I know you put your faith is super important to you. And so I think that's a cool um just picture of servant leadership, right after it talks about in scripture and Sid saying how she shows up every day, even when things aren't going well, putting people before her, being a cheerleader, and also keeping that good attitude, right? So that's sweet.
Zane, you got any questions from Sid's talk or Sid's story that you have on your mind?
Um, I mean, not really, but the only really question or thing was like, did you ever question like your sports career when it got really hard?
Good
Yeah,
question.
that's a good question. I definitely after my freshman year, it was COVID hit. A lot of things were crazy. And I definitely didn't know if, was the place for me. And I think I let, all the, negative experiences or talk kind of flood my mind with that. But I ended up, sticking it out and I ended up having the best last 3 years of my career that I could have asked for. And like finishing my softball career with like the most amazing people and coaches and experiences that I could ever ask for. So I think like there's things to be said about, if you wanted to transfer or do those things like in college. And I think that's very personal in your own experience. But I do think there's beauty in like patience and understanding that like you're trusting in kind of what's to come and like your purpose and what's to come. So I definitely had those moments, but I kind of had to remind myself, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it because I love the game in the sport and the people who've given me the sport, or is it just to do it? So you really find out that you love something when you do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, Zane, I would add to that too. So part of my background, I played hockey at Omaha, and then now I'm playing pro in Kansas City. And like one thing I have written on my whiteboard behind me is what story do I want to tell? And so I think like you have the power to change your circumstances too. So like when you're having those tough days, and like there's going to be tough days, there's going to be tough times where like things aren't going your way. Like Sydney talked about too, like there's some stuff that is out of our control, but I would also like push back and say there's a lot in our control too. And so for me, I like the challenge, like, hey, like what story do I want to write? When I'm talking when my career here is done in Kansas City or, in Omaha when I finished, it's like, well, how do I want to be remembered? Like, what do I just want to be another person that went through the program and all that, and that's great? Or do I want to be known as somebody who like made a difference on my team and in the community and all
Mm.
these other opportunities and platforms. So I think that's a cool way to look at adversity sometimes too, is like how do you want to tell people about it? When you are, a senior in high school and you have a freshman come up to you and he's like, hey, I'm struggling with playing time. Like, do you want to be like, yeah, well, when I was in your shoes, like I just kind of threw in the towel and I just, went through the motions? Or do you want to be like, yeah, you know what? I struggled with the same thing, but I just kept coming back and like pounding the rock every day, putting the work in, and you know what, like it paid off. So I kind of like taking that perspective too.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, it is 8:02. And I want to respect your time, Zane, but in any other questions? I mean, it's just that was a really good question.
Yeah, I think that's it.
That's it. Well, I just want to say thank you for hopping on.
Mm.
I know you were the only one tonight, so you kind of you got the special, all three of us. So I just want to say shout out to you for really taking the time out and sacrificing 30 minutes of your time to really get better and work on something that a lot of people kind of forget about. A lot of people forget about the mental game or the servant leadership side of the game or just being a good leader. It's all about, as Sid kind of mentioned a little bit too in her story, is like I want the accolades, I want the playing time, I want the spotlight, but there's other things too that are really important. And so shout out to you for taking the time to hop on here and get better tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, man. Have a good day. Or have a good
Let's
Bye.
night.
go, Zane. Let's go. a beast.